And I think we're live. Hold on, I'm getting a word from the producer. What was that?
Just give people a sec. When you go live,
So we're going to give them a few minutes because when we go live, then people have to log in. So there's a little bit of a lag, I've been told, on getting people into the webinar. So, hey, Victor, thanks for joining this morning or this afternoon or this evening, wherever you might be. And so I am here today. Good morning, everybody. I'm here with my new old friend, David Georgeson. How you doing, David? Welcome on the deep dive.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
So we were just wrapping while we were waiting for 5 o'clock Melbourne time to come around about a bunch of stuff that we have a lot of common interest in and common background on. So maybe we'll go back in time and do a little Back to the Future game and talk about some projects we both worked on back in the 90s.
Yeah.
That neither of us really knew that the other was involved in before we connected around the webinar. So David's with Cleanbox, and you are the CTO. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, cool. And so is that your invention sitting there behind you? Would you consider that your invention?
Yeah, it was a few years ago. Yeah. I built it out of nothing.
And so tell everybody what it is and how'd you come up with the idea?
Yeah, no, fair enough. The Cleanbox is a device that disinfects and dries VR and AR headsets between users basically at venues most of the time, museums, amusement parks, and medical professionals, anywhere where they're using the same headset for many, many people. We came up with a way of making sure that it was safe. So it uses ultraviolet grade C medical grade UV lights to corrupt the DNA of bacteria, viruses, and fungi that are on the headset, which is really cool. So when it corrupts the DNA, it does it in just this perfect little sweet spot so they can't replicate. And if they can't replicate, they're not a danger to anybody. So it works really well, and it's been being used in the hospitals for decades, but we were able to utilize some of the newer technology with the LEDs, and that works really well. And then the other thing that we do is we make sure to get rid of all the stuff that nobody wants to talk about, like sweat and sneezes and body oils and all those really cool things, by using a nanotech coating on the visor itself, so that your visor is completely coated, and when all these surfaces are treated, then moisture won't soak into the materials at all. The analogy that I use a lot is like when you wax your car, you can see a hemisphere of liquid that sits right on top. When something is hydrophobic or super hydrophobic, it doesn't even get that attached to the surface. It sits like a perfect sphere right on top of the material. And then we can use a directed air system. We have a high velocity fan system inside here that just blasts it right off the top of the materials. So even though the material technically never got wet, because the sweat and everything was sitting right on top of it, you still don't want to put that on your face, and the directed air just knocks it right off, and in 60 seconds it's dry and clean every single time.
Wow. So the first thing that struck me is the word sterile and sterilization. There's actually a literal, the reason that they use that term is because it actually neuters or spays the things that you don't want crawling on your face. And that's disgusting.
Kind of. I mean, we don't use sterilization as a term because sterile is a very specific medical terminology that means 100% clean. And what we do is we give it about 99.9%, or for people that like medical professionals that want to that need a higher, what they call a higher log kill, logarithmic, so that they want 99.999 or something like that as a percentage. You can run a longer cleaning cycle and get to those levels.
And so how important that hydrophobic chemical thing that you're doing, and sorry for my lack of terminology, I'm feeling a bit a bit moronic right now, and the UV. Like, does one work without the other, or is it the combination of those two things that makes it magic?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. It's just when I invented it, I basically put it together because we needed to be able to solve multiple problems in the same cycle. So the UV light kills bugs, it eliminates bacteria and viruses and fungi. But it does nothing to get rid of the sweat and body oils and things like that. So the nanotech and the directed air system is what takes care of that part of it. So for venues specifically, you don't want to be in line behind sweaty fat guy.
Right.
Because you don't want to put his clammy cold sweat on your face. And so we needed to make sure that was taken care of, in addition to making sure that users and guests were safe from any contagions that were left behind, and to be honest, to make sure that venue operators were safe from somebody getting really annoyed and being nasty legally.
Yeah. So one of the things I talk about a lot is hygiene theater, and I think that might even be a term that I coined after what I call security theater in the airports with TSA, right? So they make this big deal about going through X-ray machines and backscatters and all of this shit and emptying your when, but if you look behind the scenes at the statistics, the amount of shit that gets through security in the airport is absurd. And my own experience as a frequent traveler is sometimes things set alarms and sometimes they don't, and they're the same things. And so if they're scary to some people and they're not to other people working behind the X-ray counter, you have to wonder about the efficacy of security in airports. That's not what we're here to talk about, but they make a big show of it to make people feel safe. And one of the things I talk to operators about is to make sure that they create hygiene theater. Efficacy is one thing, but making a big show of the fact that you're making an effort is actually, I think, the most important thing. And in the early days of zero latency, I would recommend to operators, they put a big sign up on the wall that said cleaning station, right? So when people came in, they saw that, because in case you didn't see the person rubbing the mask with the wipe and the chemical, you at least see a big sign there that says, oh, this is something they're thinking about. And so what I love about the Cleanbox is that it's hygiene theater to the nth degree, and it's actually cool looking too, right? So where's it being used? Where's it being used effectively? And how's it getting out in the world? Because it seems like a really unique and a little weird approach to a problem that most people just take Clorox wipes to, which we'll talk about maybe about how horrible that is. How's traction going, and how are they getting out there?
Okay, fair enough. We started out with a limited run of production so that we could field test a bunch of different units, which is what we were calling generation A of the units. And we got lots of feedback from customers, and we basically fixed all those issues before we got to Gen B, which is these ones that are available now. We are in the medical industry. We're partnered with some really big players, like I think RealMax is working with us now to make sure that the headsets that they put out are already Cleanbox ready. We have been working with some of the big players in the industry. I can't remember for sure whether I was supposed to talk about this, but I think she's okay with it. We've been working with Periscape and some other folks, as well as getting into installations that are already out there. Like, I don't know if you've heard of the Black Box VR gym up in San Francisco.
I have, I'd love if you're familiar with that. We're going to talk about that too, because I think that's a crazy idea.
Yeah, they totally gamified the idea of exercise, and then because people were going to be so sweaty and foul after they ran treadmill for so long, they had to have something to clean it. So they came to us and talked about it, because when we were putting this together, I'm sorry about that. I don't know how to close that, but anyway. When we were putting this together, Amy and I originally were talking to the Smithsonian about building a venue up there. And we realized that if we had 1 million people going through our venue every year, eventually we were going to get our butts sued off when, Susie got the measles, or, Freddie got the mumps, that kind of stuff. And so we wanted to make sure that we had something that would actually clean it. And when I did a bunch of studying on the wipes, I started realizing they're better than nothing, but only just barely, because they only kill what's on the surface. And honestly, I guess the thing that really drove me negative on the whole idea was, besides the waste and the smell and all that other stuff, was the fact that alcohol does kill germs, but only if the surface is wet for a minute or more. And nobody's doing that. I mean, you can ask any hospital. It takes a minute or more for the surface of material to be cleaned by alcohol. So you have to keep it wet, and nobody's doing that. Nobody's putting that much moisture on these things for obvious reasons. You don't want this to be soaked when you give it to the next customer. So there had to be something else, and that's when I started studying and researching to find out about ultraviolet light, which is, like I said, been used by the medical industry for a really long time. But these LEDs that we use inside here have only been available for a few years. Well, they've been available longer than that, but really like commercially available and easy to get for a few years. So putting those together with, I just happened to run into a guy that was doing a demo of this nanotech application that he was using, and I realized that if we took those two together and we added directed air, then we had something that was fundamentally better than what was being available right now. And it was easy to put together. And the first one I built was basically to protect our own butts. That's what the device was for, was so that we could say, you're doing better than everybody else. And then when we showed it to other people, they were like, and maybe we want that too. And then that kept rolling, and all of a sudden we had a company.
Yeah, interesting. Look, people, like, if they had, like, certain studies come out all the time. Recently, one came out from the McDonald's self-serve order screens, and that 100% of the ones that they tested had fecal matter on them, right? And so like, you know, like we live in a world of germs. They're everywhere. We're touching them all the time. Like we touch the doorknob and then we touch our face. Like, Jesus Christ, like, it's out there. Like, so how much of this really, like, so from a legal liability standpoint, like, I'm going to call a little bit of bullshit on this one, right? So one is that and I'll give you a true story, right? So Laser Storm, my first real company, in the laser tag business, I got sued once by a woman whose son played in our laser tag game. He was probably 10 or 12 years old and wound up with an eye infection. And she was convinced that it was because he got shot with a laser in his eye. And the first thing is, we don't use lasers. We used high powered LEDs at the time, the very first instance of the ultra brights. And second is, if I could transmit like virus or bacteria over light, I would be selling that to the military and making billions of dollars. And so, but it didn't stop her from fucking suing me and for me having to engage my insurance company and da. So like, none of this stuff stops people from suing you, first of all. True. Right? And B is like, there's just germs everywhere. And so, you know, again, I do think, look, the ooh factor is massive. Like, I've watched the gross factor of putting a wet, smelly headset on. I think that's actually the number one thing. And number two is like having this consistent operational procedure with a cool looking device that shows that you care about the safety, security, and comfort of your guests is actually, to me, if I were doing your marketing and positioning, and I understand a lot of yours is around that safety factor, which is important, but I actually think there's a bigger factor. Which I want to show my guests that I actually care, and I'm going to go the extra mile to make sure that they have a great experience. And I think that your thing does that in a really cool way, and I'm hoping to see it get out in the world in a massive push. And hopefully, this is a little bit of help in that area.
No, I appreciate that. And on that subject, I mean, this is how you get sick. Rubbing your eyes. Yeah. So your nose. Making sure that this area is relatively safe is a good thing, right? That's a solid good thing. And making sure that you're not running a risk in that area, because I guess the joke that we say all the time is, you can Purell your hands, but you can't Purell your face. So it's nice. It's nice for that to be clean. But going on your idea of the PR value, this is when the fan turns on, this might get a little bit loud, so I'm not sure how that'll affect the microphone. But we do have some of that. I mean, these obviously ultraviolet lights are invisible, so you can't see that. So we have some ambient lights and stuff in there to let people know that, hey, look, mommy, it's actually getting clean, that kind of stuff, like you were talking about. And that's purely theater. But these the blue lights that you're seeing in the center there, that's actually the extra radiation. I don't want to use the word radiation, but because all light is radiation, so that's why I used it. But it's the wavelengths that are slightly off of ultraviolet, and that's the blue that you're seeing.
Got it.
The actual ultraviolet is invisible. So everything that you're seeing in here and how it gradually, over the course of time, it goes from purple to blue is just to show people that it's actually doing something. But in 60 seconds, that's what it's for. And the reason why we have an acrylic enclosure is exactly what you're saying, is so that when a venue puts this into a place, people can look at it and say, look, they're actually doing something that's better than wipe hand.
And so what's it cost? Like if an arcade wanted to put this in there, a bunch of these, or one in every booth, or whatever it would take, what's it cost?
Well, it's obviously a business to business product. So it's around the CX1 here is $1,100, and the other units that we're building and available this summer are they're higher priced because they do more units at a time. I don't know whether Amy has talked to you about the CX6. Our nomenclature is really easy to understand. CX1 does 1 unit at a time. CX6 does 6. But it's a drawer design. You pull it out and you put all the headsets in it, and you close the drawer and then push the button. And there's I lost track of what the question was now.
Yeah, we're talking about price, and so I think it's about $1,000 a headset, right? Is that about ballpark?
Yeah, it's about. Well, you can do lots of different headsets in one unit. Because normally,
right. Per cleaning unit, I guess, right? Yeah.
It's $1,100 for a unit, and from everything we can tell, that's going to pay itself off in a month because you're paying that much for a guy to stand there and wipe units. Maybe he's doing some other stuff on the side, but eventually, like if you're doing roller coaster kind of enterprises, you have dedicated people that are just standing there wiping, and this is cheaper. And plus, it's actually doing something, which is useful. And I think, like you said, the theater value of it is very high. Letting people realize you actually care what's happening to the visors that they're wearing, and their health is a good thing.
Yeah. And so if you were in an arcade and you were running an arcade with 10 Vive booths, let's say, one of these probably is enough because people go in asynchronously, right? It's not like you have to do 10 headsets at once. And so if you have 10 people going through an hour and they're going in and out at different stages and you're getting them set up, it seems like, but then can you move it around, or does it, like if the headsets are tethered, do you have to untether the headset? What's the mechanics of using this in an arcade for somebody?
Yeah, it all depends upon the setup of the venue. Like for instance, if it's a multiplayer venue and all the headsets are going to come out at the same time, then you would either need multiple units or like a CX6 or a CX4 to be able to do a batch at a time, so that you can keep your throughput going through. But like you said, if it's asynchronous, if there's a bunch of people coming in, like like those original arcades that IMAX did, where there was a bunch of different games that were going on, the people were coming off those different. Yeah, you could keep using the same unit. Our experience with venues is that you can throw the unit, throw a headset in there, hit the button, turn around, explain to the next person what they're going to do and what they're going to see, and by the time you're done with that, the headset's ready. So that works really well. I think that it really just depends upon. The tethered question. That was what I was trying to get to. So you may notice it's probably hard to see because black on black, but on the base unit here, right here, this is a tether slot.
Gotcha.
So when you put a tethered unit in there, the cable goes in there, and then the door closes over it nicely. Now, obviously, if you have a tethered visor, you're not going to move that around a lot. Most of these tethered units, you don't want to unplug them and then move it somewhere else, because when you plug it back in again, you have to recalibrate it and set it up. So nobody really wants to do that. But for non-tethered units, this is brilliant, because you can put these anywhere. You can walk them over to the spots. We have talked to people that have multiple tethered consoles that are in a centralized area, and we've talked to them about putting the units on a cart that could then just be rolled over. Then they put the units in where the tethers can reach, take them out again, and then roll the cart to the side.
I was just going to ask how much power it takes. Could you put like one of those, a battery inverter or something on a cart and plug it in and run it all day off of a 1,000 amp, goal zero power supply or something like that?
Yeah, you can. Doesn't take much power. It draws less than 5 amps, and the cycle is only 60 seconds. So you can run it off a battery unit like that for a long time. In fact, we've been talking about building just such a unit for. Well, I am going to get in trouble if I mention that. So, you should talk to Greg. I think it was Greg Agostini at Virtual Works did a cart recently for Oculus Go's, and it had charging and everything built in. It was beautiful. Like, he did an amazing job of that. I don't know if you know those guys. No, that's cool. I haven't seen that.
If you're tired of designing hardware, yeah, those guys do some amazing work. So how did you? So your background is comes from like games, right? And that's so for everybody, George goes way back into the days of actually arcade games. Where did you start? Like where'd your career start? Let's just go back there. Let's start from the beginning.
Well, my professional gaming career started. Well, I worked on the very first Advanced Dungeons and Dragons computer games that were ever made. That was the gold box games back at SSI, Tools of Radiance series.
Wow,
that was a long time ago. And way before then, one of my college jobs was actually running an 80s arcade, so that was rocking. Absolutely
awesome.
I can go.
Where was that?
Oh, that was up in Oregon. When I started my game career, it was down in California.
And so let's talk about the arcade, all right? Because there's a lot of people watching this that just don't go back that far. They're not as old as we are. And so, what was the arcade? Where was it, and what was it like? Because I think, and the reason I'm asking for context is because I really see this new VR arcade of the early mall arcades. And I'm going to talk about, not before the mall. It was a strip center. So tell me about the arcade you worked in college. What was it like?
It was one of the better arcades I've ever been to. We had 100 different machines plus pinball games. It was very family oriented, very clean, very well lit, and it was still. Looking back on my life, it was still one of the best jobs I ever had.
That's awesome.
It was, it was my Tom Sawyer painting the fence job. I talked to kids all day that were playing games, and then at night, when I didn't want to actually have to do all the work that I was supposed to do to run it, I would get them to do all my work, and then we would play games for 3 or 4 hours after hours. So it was great. But the experience of running an arcade and seeing all those different games running at the same time, and people being able to get all of those kinds of different experiences all at the same time, and it being extremely socialized, is probably why I got into socialized gaming. So most of my games have been networked multiplayer games. And some of the games that I did were, giant world games, PlanetSides and the EverQuest and things like that. And building worlds almost certainly started from watching the social interactions that happened back in those 80s arcades. Everybody knew each other. Everybody was trying to get the best high scores. Everybody was there talking about their passion all at the same time, what the best games were, how to beat them, watching each other play. That kind of experience just until now, even with the VR arcades, we're still not quite getting that level.
Why is that? And why is that?
VR by its nature, when you're watching somebody playing a VR game, it kind of tends to be a little bit isolating. You're not just hovering over the screen waiting for your turn to play a quarter. It's something. It's kind of like well, I'm going to get out on a limb too far here, I think, but like I play a lot of escape rooms and I really enjoy them. And one of the reasons why I like escape rooms is talking to everybody that you played with afterwards about what you did wrong and what you did right in their room.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I still don't feel like I'm getting that when I go to a VR arcade, and I'm not exactly sure why.
That's because it's not a shared experience, right? I mean, there's like, so if I talk about my experience, you had a very different experience in a different game potentially. And I think that's one of the things that's missing are social experiences, and the research overwhelmingly shows that consumers say, like 80% of them say, I want social experiences in VR.
Absolutely.
That's like, give me social experiences. Yet, we're seeing all of these room scale Vive-based arcades pop up where you put somebody in a phone booth for an hour and they have their own experience. And it was really interesting. I was at the Synthesis VR operates an arcade in LA. The owner of that, Shabir. And I was there interviewing him actually for a Facebook Live. And a couple came in, and they were probably in their late 30s, I'm guessing. And they came in every Tuesday night or Thursday night, whatever it was, for an hour to play Arizona Sunshine together.
Oh, cool.
And they would go in and they would play together as a couple, and then it was date night. And I'm like, that's what we need. We need more of that. And there's, unfortunately, Arizona Sunshine's a hard game. It's got high skill level. The progression's difficult. And so you got to really be into it to be able to get and have fun. Like the first 10 minutes of Arizona Sunshine can be really frustrating if you haven't done VR and you haven't played a lot of games. And so it's not a highly accessible game. But we need more of those like multiplayer games that are easy to onboard. And then what I really love is what Tommy Goodkin was talking about a couple of weeks ago, where they have this Ayahuasca VR experience that just showed at Tribeca Film Festival. And so what they're doing is they're building an ayahuasca room where everybody sits around a circle and does the headset and has a shared experience. And then afterwards they talk about it and they're curating discussion. And that's what you're talking about, is like the escape rooms is where that happens naturally because it's a shared experience. I'd love to see more of that.
You are absolutely preaching to the choir. When I got into,
so put down that Cleanbox shit. Let's make some great games. No, sorry.
Well, I mean, Cleanbox happened because that's what I wanted to do. Was I came from traditional computer games, right? And I wanted to go into VR, but I wanted to do it in a way that I saw an opportunity with networked experiences. I saw almost immediately that home wasn't going to be as big as everybody was hoping it was going to be, and that we needed to do something that was really unique that would pull people together. And networked experiences where you can have 20 people in the same area exploring through something and then being able to compare notes afterwards and have no capability of actually finishing everything in that area so that you want to keep coming back over and over again. That's really the experiences that I expect to see and never quite do. Like one of the best experiences that I've had at somebody's venue has been, I think it's closed right now, at least temporarily, but it was the Alien Descent thing in Orange County.
Yeah, tell me about that. I've done it. I had my own opinions of it. What did you like about it?
I loved it because it basically proved a lot of the ideas that I had early on, which was having staircases and poles and things like that that are accurately portrayed within the graphics. And when you reach out to touch them, they're actually really there. That makes all of the other stuff feel like, oh my God, this is all real. I mean, okay, the graphics were a little bit low. You were really only with one other person. The other two people that were in the experience it really didn't matter what the latency was, so on and so forth. So there was things that could have been a lot better. But the having all of your senses match and then being able to talk to somebody else after the experience whose sensory experience is also matched was kick-ass. I mean, that was absolutely great.
You know what I loved about Alien Descent? I thought the gameplay was, when I think of aliens, man, I want to be crawling around the Nostromo in the dark, scared, like pooping my pants because I'm waiting for an alien to jump out at me. And I thought that they PG rated that one a little.
Yeah, that's fair.
It was the pre-show and the post-show. Right? The when you went in, for those of you that haven't done it or didn't do it, you go in and there's a whole story. The lobby's themed. All the people briefing were in character. So you were a space marine recruit, and you were going to, get the xenomorphs, and you'd go into this capsule that basically froze you, right? And then you'd spin around, and then you're in the arena. And so they went above and beyond what anybody's done, in my opinion, on the pre-show and the post-show, what I call Act 1 and Act 3. There's every story has 3 acts, right? There's the setup, the conflict, and the resolution. And VR is all about the conflict, the Act 2, but we underplay the setup and the resolution. And what that does is it jars people in the experience, and it doesn't create like this really great holistic 360 experience. And I thought they did the best job of anybody that I'd seen. Even if Act 2 was underwhelming, I think the overall experience, because of Act 1 and Act 3, was fantastic. And I'm looking forward to see what they do next.
But even basic network games, you don't see very much of them. Like, for instance, I maybe I'm just missing it, but I haven't seen a networked flight sim or racing sim. And that seems like a no-brainer that you could do for homework. Try again. For people playing at home, or having like you go to Dave & Buster's and they have one of those driving games, and there's 8 people there. Well, maybe you can't get 8 people sitting next to each other in VR at a venue, but you could certainly network a bunch of venues together and have exactly the same kinds of experiences. And I think there are. I think there are some driving. I think there are some driving sims that are networked together. And I've seen them in arcades, actually, where you have like four player arcade drivers, which make people puke really badly, because driving in VR is if you don't get the motion right, it can be really painful. But yeah, I mean, you have the advantage of they're initiating the movement. So that's not so bad. And if they can feel the steering wheel, well, anyway, all this stuff. I don't need to tell you.
Yeah. No, but the audience doesn't necessarily, right? It's not for me; it's for them. Sure. Yeah, and so all right. So you started out in the arcades, and that gave you this kind of idea of what's possible, and seeing all these people play these games, and then how did you get in the video game business? Like what prompted that, and how'd you get in?
I had a friend who got me my first gig as a designer, and I worked on those gold box games that I mentioned before as a designer. And then after that, I was always a director and producer. I had a management background. I'd run small businesses for people, that sort of thing. And the industry was, in its infancy. We were just after, like when I joined, was just after the years when people were selling floppy bags in Ziplocs on pegboard at the computer store. So, I mean, it was really a long time ago. And we were running with, a big team was a team of 8, and now it's hundreds. So the industry has changed a lot since I started in it, but it was always really fun. And I was fortunate enough to get to be a producer and creative director on almost every project I ever worked on. So it was really fun.
And so you were at 3DO.
Don't mention 3DO. It's like, I was for a bad year.
And so for those who don't remember 3DO, what was give everybody a quick 30-second on 3DO and what it was, and what was it like? What was it like working there?
Oh man, I don't usually talk trash on people, but at least it was a long time ago. I was let's see, where had I been right before that? Oh, I had been at Activision right before that, I think. And Activision was basically mothballing all of its internal teams. When I first started working there, I think there was 11 internal development teams at Activision, which was amazing. It was incredible to be surrounded by that many talented people. But they got mothballed down, and when we were doing Heavy Gear 2, I think we were the last dev team left standing. Besides, I think it was us in Battlezone. And the writing was on the wall that Bobby was going to go into consoles, so on and so forth. And so I got a job out at 3DO to make a version of Might and Magic. And Well, there was lots of promises made, and unfortunately, they didn't have the resources or the time in order to actually fulfill any of that stuff. So that was literally one of the worst years in my gaming career, and I'm glad you brought it up.
But look, the reason I bring it up is so Trip Hawkins founded 3DO, and he came out of Electronic Arts, which was really, really successful, right? And so he was Apple Computer, then Electronic Arts, and then he started 3DO. And I think that and what that to me is about, as I say, and there's a saying, hardware is hard. And 3DO was building their own console, and they wanted to build a really high-end console. And so what we're seeing is these companies that are coming in from the software space, right, that are game developers, and they're seeing VR, and they're enamored with VR. They don't know anything about location-based entertainment. They don't know anything about hardware, supply chain, service support, installation. And then they're trying to build these solutions and bring them to market with a full stack of shit. And the game development's hard enough. Moving into market, understand?
No, you're right.
It's hard, and now you throw hardware on top of it, and so it's hard. And here's a guy who was super successful, had actually raised a bunch of money, and still couldn't pull it off. And so so talk to me about transitioning from software to hardware with Cleanbox, and what's that been like, and what are some of the challenges that you're finding running a hardware business?
Well, even though I was a producer and director in software, I always was building stuff on the side as far as hardware goes. A lot of it was for these overly elaborate Halloween parties and stuff like that I was doing with active volcanoes and giant King Kong walls. And it doesn't really matter. But there was all
I want to party with you, cowboy.
They were good parties. But the building all those things and coordinating all the special effects and figuring out exactly how to trigger things remotely and at certain times and stuff like that, it kind of gave me a background in figuring out really radically different kinds of ways to pull off stunts that I wanted to do. And so when I started building things for network VR experiences, of which, of course, the Cleanbox was one of those things, I was looking into hydraulic solutions for, I had this idea of a hover pods that could be next to each other and have like 20 people all networked into a situation where they could see each other and be able to go through all that stuff.
By the way, I have the company that's invented that, and they're a startup out of Sydney, Australia, and they're in an incubator, and they desperately need financing and help. So let's take that conversation offline. I'd love to introduce you to them, and sure. Maybe you've got some guidance for them.
Yeah, sure, no problem. Yeah, there's a baby patent out there somewhere that had a bunch of ideas in it, yeah, no, I mean, I believe that hardware and making your other senses match what you were seeing with your brain, with your eyes, would be where it was at, and that was what I was trying to pioneer. And then the Cleanbox was just one of those things. It was a side thing that we built that got incredibly popular really fast, and everybody wanted one, and so then I just dug down in and figured out what needed to get done and how to build it, and worked with experts, and the end result is behind me.
So what skill sets do you need as an entrepreneur? What skill sets do you need to develop to be able to run a hardware business versus a software business? Like, what are you finding different in that?
Well, in some ways, it's easier than running a software business, in my opinion. There are a lot of experts that you can lean on the hardware business that know how to, make chassis and where to get acrylic and where you can get UVC lights and all that other stuff. And so there are a lot of learning curves to go through if you've never had to do that before. Certainly, major learning curves in order to procure the materials and get them manufactured the way you want it, and then be able to assemble things. But it's not really that different in concept than how you go about building software. You still have to have the ideas originally. You have to find the experts to be able to do the things that need to be done. And then you have to be able to keep honing the idea as it comes together so that it becomes the end product that you want. Conceptually, it's not that dramatically different. It's just that there's a lot of Like you had to learn how to code in order to be able to do software. Or you had to learn how to do art to be an artist. Well, when you're doing these things, you have to learn all of these other pathways that need to
industrial design, electrical engineering, mechanical design, materials engineering. There's like just different specialties. So like how many different consultants or advisors did you wind up tapping into to bring that product to market?
Well, originally I was doing it all myself. So I was the first one of these was made out of wood, and the halo inside was a heater vent that I used tin snips to knock the holes out in. And then
do you still have the prototype somewhere?
I know I threw it away finally, but I have pictures. Yeah, it got cannibalized for parts because back in the first days, waste not.
Don't have a lot of money.
Yeah, yep. Exactly. So as it got more mature, and I started to realize we needed to do things like, for instance, injection molding. Like we can't keep going with 3D printing because it's slow. It's not that the quality is not great. Actually, if you print it right, the quality is great, but it's very slow. So we need to go to injection molding. That means we needed to talk to people like that. When I got around to doing printed circuit boards instead of Raspberry Pi stuff, then I needed to lean on some engineers that knew more about making printed circuit board design. But as far as creating the original logic, figuring out how things would go, what the spatial relationships were, and everything like that, I was able to do almost all of that on my own.
Yeah, I think the prototyping, often that's what happens is inventors do that first article by themselves. But, I find that companies underestimate the amount of effort it takes to go from that into production.
It's a lot. It's an amazing amount. Last December was extremely difficult for us when we were getting ready for our original production runs with the Generation A product. It was very difficult. There was a lot of learning curves that were coming together all at the same time. And we were still extremely small and underfunded. Since then, we've gotten better funding, and it's been a lot easier as we got to lean on some other people. But I'm still like 80% of my time is design, figuring out what the next product is going to be like and what we're doing with it.
Yeah, cool. I find that what happens a lot is companies think they have a product that, because it works in-house, and they test it and they bring their family and friends through it, and people have fun, and then they bring it to a trade show, and over a 4-day trade show in Orlando at IAAPA, all of a sudden the bugs come in and it's just not really hardened, and they're disappointed, and they have that one opportunity to launch and then they miss it because they haven't tested the product enough or they haven't got it out there. And it was interesting last week. Michael Bridgman from Major Mega, who's building the Hyperdeck, which is talk about a big complex piece of hardware. Yeah. He talked about when they went out in the market and talked to operators. The operators told them, we only think about buying stuff at IAAPA. And so companies that launch in this industry and they go to IAAPA, it's like Eminem and 8 Mile. You got one shot. You're gonna make it right, or you're gonna let it slip away. And I wish companies were more prepared and understood, A, the importance of that first public launch, and B, how much testing and iteration you need to go into making sure that the damn thing works when you show it to the public. And
we did a ton of testing, and we still found things that we just didn't expect. Like now we've gotten to the point now where we literally do concrete drop tests. We drop our units.
There's an ASTM test for that, isn't there?
God, yeah. I mean, it's just like the first couple of times you ship a unit to somebody, you start realizing there are 800-pound gorillas working in the shipping companies. They're clearly playing football with your product. So yeah, I mean, there were some learning curves from that point of view also, but I think we've gone through most of that stuff. I never seem to be done iterating. The only reason why I stopped working on a project is because something else is more important. But I mean, even this, which I consider to be pretty bulletproof, there's still a couple little things here and there that I want to change, mostly to do with maintenance, making it easier to take parts on and off. It's an interesting experience.
So Peter's asking about the CX4 and power usage, and you said there's a CX4 and a CX6 coming, which holds 4 headsets and 6 headsets at the same time. What's the timeline for those products coming to market? how much power do they use, and what's the price range of those going to be, if you can talk about it?
I think the CX6 will come out first. It's coming along really well. We're working on the drawer chassis right now, but the guts of it are the same guts. So it's still each of these CX1s uses 5 amps of power. So if you have the CX6, it's going to use 30. Probably no more, no less, because all of the guts, and I should have brought one in, but the halo that you're seeing here, old term, it used to be shaped more like an angel's halo, but the halo or cone that you see in here, the fan base and the fan that goes with it, and the logic board in the back are exactly the same, just replicated more times inside the CX6.
Gotcha.
It doesn't draw that much power, certainly a lot less than a lot of other things you could run. It does work very well.
So let's go back. So I'm going to go back in time again. So you were at Activision and you worked on a game. We talked about this before the webinar started. You worked on a game called Heavy Gear 2.
Yep. That was fun.
And that was a mech game, right? It was one of the first really big popular mech games.
Yeah, when I first started working for Activision, I was fortunate enough to get to work with the MechWarrior 2 team. So MechWarrior 2 Mercenaries and the Titanium Pack, which was one of the first graphic accelerated games, things like that.
Yeah.
And then when Activision lost the MechWarrior license, we wanted to keep making giant robot games, and so we started talking to the Canadian group, the role-playing group, to do Heavy Gear. And the first Heavy Gear game got done while I was still working on the Battle Pack and the Titanium Pack for MechWarrior. And then I got to run the Heavy Gear 2 team, which was really cool because we were all really proud that we had the world's first steady-state lasers. That was hard to do back then. That was really hard. And the zero-G stuff, I still am very proud of the zero-G combat that was in that game.
Yeah. That David didn't know was that at Global VR, which was the first VR or the first VR arcade game company that was really successful that I helped launch in late 90s, one of the first games we launched was we licensed Heavy Gear from Activision and ported it to a VR game. And so there's actually a VR version of Heavy Gear out there in the universe somewhere, probably on a VR Vortex in an arcade in North Africa or somewhere in Argentina or something. That if anybody runs across it, drop us a line and let us know. What was your first VR experience?
My first VR experience. Well, I bought the first VR. I'm not really sure. I bought the Rift when it was really new, and I played everything that I could find in there. The ones that
so it was fairly recent then.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really mess with VR back when you were working with it before. I was very, very busy. When I was in the game industry, I was working 15, 16 hours a day, every year, every day for decades. And so I was pretty tunnel vision on the things that I was working on.
So what are the things outside of Cleanbox? What are the things that you're seeing in VR now that excite you?
That excite me? Well, the trend towards tetherless is obviously a good thing. Getting free of the tether just makes people more willing to do it. I like the fact that even though it's changing very slowly, the form factor is slowly getting better. The AR goggles that are out there, the Magic Leap and stuff like that, are easier to use. Although I guess I'm still disappointed that the Magic Leap has a tether. But as far as the venues and stuff go, the stuff that I like best is the stuff that we talked about earlier, that tries to involve more of your senses.
The environmental haptic stuff, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not really a big fan of a straight up VR arcade where you go in and play a game that you could play at home. I want something that's going to be really unique, like the Alien Descent thing, or I'm trying to remember the one that my partner was raving about the other day. But there's several
companies that are in that space is the Void, Nomadic, Dreamscape. Those are the three other big companies that are building these. And if I forgot anybody, I apologize, but those are the ones that come top of mind to me that have mapped the interior to the virtual experience in a way that really is impactful.
Yeah, there's a VR escape room somewhere close to here, which I keep meaning to go to, and I haven't done it yet because I'm curious to see, is that a thing? Does that actually work? And I want to see if that works or not. But in general, it's the things that really physically put me into a different world that really excite me. And so anything that's got a sim cradle, anything that's going to vibrate and move, let me free roam and touch things, that stuff really,
well, my guess is you'll love the hyperdeck when you get to do that, because that one's pretty extreme. And on the VR escape room, I'm working on a project in Sydney that I can't really talk about yet. It's going to launch in August. It's a VR escape room, and I've been looking at that industry, and there's some great experiences out there. There's one called Virtual Rooms. It's in LA. Where are you based?
Carlsbad, San Diego area.
Oh, awesome. Yeah. I lived in San Clemente and I was the chief operating officer for BuzzTime, which is based in Carlsbad. So I was there every day for a while. It's called Virtual Rooms, and they have one that's it's a 4-player Vive based, but you're all in the same space and you have to pass like virtual items to each other to solve puzzles, and it requires a lot of collaboration and teamwork. And then, Ubisoft has gotten into that space in a big way. They've created an Assassin's Creed themed escape room experience for 4 players. And they've been, and so they're making a big, it's called Blue Byte Software, which is owned by Ubisoft, and they're leveraging the Ubi IP into multiplayer long form escape room games. And so I haven't done it yet, but there's an escape room show in Austin, Texas, in San Antonio, Texas, the beginning of August. So if you're really into escape rooms, that could be a fun diversion. Go ahead.
No, I do like escape rooms. I think one of the reasons why I'm interested in a VR escape room is because a lot of times VR experiences are very, very short for good reasons.
Yeah.
And so one of the ways that people overcome the shortness of a VR experience is, of course, by leaning on IPs, so you don't have to do all the prep work to get people in the mindset to be able to go forward with it. And one of the reasons why I'm interested in a VR escape room is because it's a longer experience, and I'm curious to see how that works and how you stay with other people.
I can tell you, so one of my guests a few weeks ago was the founder of Exit VR out of Germany, Sven, and he talked about their very first game was 40 something minutes, and they've made the second game longer because they find that people actually want longer experiences. And Zero Latency, their first site in Melbourne, is a 45-minute free roam adventure in game for 45 minutes, and it's their top performing site. All the data, and all were 25 to 30 minutes, and so the longer you're in VR, the deeper the immersion, the more that fantasy reality line blurs. And that's the reason to do VR, is to blur that line and be immersed. And so I'm surprised. I'm really surprised. And, and this is the problem, for those of you out there listening to customers, like there's a fine line between listening to customers and realizing customers don't know what the fuck they're talking about sometimes. And Zero Latency went to IAPA in 2015. And we're told, you couldn't do a 45-minute experience. It has to be 10 minutes. And so they built a couple of 10-minute games, and they didn't do as well as the 45-minute game. And so then they compromised by saying, let's go 25 minutes, where, I'm still in the school that I think the longer stuff is going to be better. And this is where I think the theater industry, where you're going to see VR go into the theater industry, is when you get these longer form that the theaters are experimenting with VR, and they're IMAX and I think Spaces is in there with the Terminator one, and I think the Void. But I call that drive-through VR. It's like a 10-minute experience. It's not really going to be deep and meaningful. And so I'm, like you, looking forward to more long-form, really immersive, social, story-driven stuff. I think that's going to be the game changer.
Well, the ultimate goal.
What is it?
Are you old enough to have read the Larry David books, Dream Park?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's the ultimate goal.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Get an amusement park set up where people are actually experiencing things, networked together and actually moving through a real life area, probably with an AR kind of overlay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would
love to build that.
And
it's everything we ever wanted to do with an MMO, but so much better.
And the question is, though, then at what point does that technology work its way into the home to where we can do that with virtual telepresence and not actually have to leave the home? And what happens to society when we get to that point? Because I actually believe we're going to get there. It might be 10 years away, but the stuff that's happening in Oculus Labs is like terrifying and amazing as far as like realistic avatars and virtual telepresence. Like the curve is exponential, and I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility in our lifetime.
It's kind of hard to believe in, say, like Ready Player One. It's kind of hard to believe in that and getting that full that motion experience, where he's jumping around and running and ducking and weaving and bobbing through stuff. That's hard to believe that you could do from a home point of view. Certainly, we can get closer to it.
Do you need to? But do you need to? Like at some point, like so. I had this really. If you ever been walking through like an airport and they have the moving sidewalks, and there's one that's not working, and you step onto it, and all of a sudden your body leans forward because your brain's anticipated that movement. Like it's a real mind fuck, right? Yeah. And so our brains can be tricked into things really easily, and VR does a great job of that. And so, my question is, are we gonna learn what it feels like to be doing these motions without the physical motion? And are we, they're going to design new control mechanisms and new locomotion mechanisms. And I believe our brain is going to rewire. And then you get into brain computer interface, right? Where all of a sudden I think I'm walking, my avatar's walking. I think I'm ducking, my avatar's ducking. Like that shit's going to happen. And when that happens, you don't have to worry about all the the Bubameister, as my grandmother would have called it, about the treadmill and the harness and everything, that's applying yesterday's thinking to tomorrow's technology, right? Which we often do because it's the only thing we can imagine.
That's possible. So what you're saying is that your body's not actually moving. You just think that you're moving. I think you're still fighting your monkey hindbrain, though, because your senses are still there, whether or not you actually think that they're there or not. You'd have to.
Yeah, and that's where fooling your brain comes in. And maybe there's got to be some, there's a drug that they invent that you inject that helps to suspend, that belief system or something. But I'm a full believer that in the next 10 years, maybe 15 years, that shit's going to be real. And then I think this, what happens to society gets really interesting, right? If we don't actually have to leave our homes to have social experiences and be with people and experience things, what happens to the travel industry? What happens to the entertainment industry? What happens to workplace? What happens to education? Like all of these things become remote. And I think that's where VR all of a sudden, this is the long tail, like the real impact of VR that nobody's thinking about right now. I'm sure some people are thinking about it, guys like, Elon Musk, but I think most people are thinking about, why can't I get higher resolution, or, why can't I get, adjust my pupillary distance better? And I'm thinking about what the fuck happens when Mark Zuckerberg is in all of our heads.
Well, I mean, if we could solve the locomotion problem and getting your senses to match, I mean, the number of people like myself that would love to build that virtual world where everybody's actually in a virtual reality with each other and network like you are in an MMO, but with better gameplay. It would be astounding to work on something like that. It would be amazing.
Yeah.
But there's, like you said, some major obstacles to get over. I think maybe Dream Park might be a step towards that direction.
Yeah. And so for those of you that haven't read, that's the VR version of what was Orson Scott Card's laser tag book that we all, Ender's Game. Back when we were in the laser tag business, we all read Ender's Game. That was and I think Dream Park is the VR version of Ender's Game for laser tag. So if you haven't read that one, go dust it off, get it on Amazon. It's a great read. In fact, I haven't read it since probably the 80s. And I probably I can't, because the book hasn't changed, but we've all changed. And so reading that again from today's perspective is something that I'll probably need to do and might need to dust that one off.
I dusted it off a couple of years ago. And even though it's still a really fun read, some of the technology has gotten dated finally. But the concept is still rocking. And an adaptation of it using today's technology, you could do it. It would be, I'm sorry, I'm pointing over here like you can see all the gear that's over on the side of the room. But using like the Magic Leap or something like that, to do something like that where you overlay and have a backpack and be able to run, a game like that where you're seeing graphics and everybody's experiencing it. You can see that. You can see that happening in the next couple of years, maybe.
Yeah. So speaking with the AR, you've played with Magic Leap and some of the AR headsets. How's the field of view or lack of field of view for you? That's my reaction. Every time I put one on, I'm just like, oh fuck, this sucks.
But it shows you the potential. Like if you could get out of postage stamp land, it would be the best. You could do so much with it because there's literally no difference between AR and VR. You could use the same hardware if you could get the field of view bigger. You just paint everything. You don't show the real world.
Yeah. So the one big difference, though, this isn't about the hardware, but the difference in the experience. This is something Doug Trumbull said that I was really fascinated. Doug Trumbull, legendary director, special effects guy, did the effects for 2001: Space Odyssey, created show scan motion simulation. He's one of the first motion simulation guys. And he said that what AR does is it actually is more convincing to your brain because when you're looking at the environment, your brain knows that it's real. And so when the dinosaur comes stomping down the street that is real, your brain believes that the dinosaur is real because the street is real and the car is real and the tree is real and the building's real. And so AR actually has the ability to do more suspension of disbelief and be more realistic, but not when you're staring at it through something the size of a postage stamp held out at 5 feet from your face, and that's the problem.
And I apologize, I kind of misspoke. What I meant was the same hardware could do both kinds.
Yeah.
That's really what I meant. I didn't mean there was no difference between AR and VR because fundamentally, obviously, with VR you can paint an entirely different reality, and with AR you're overlaying a reality. Yeah,
the experience is different, but the hardware, I agree with you. And at some point, most people feel like those are going to converge. And as you're starting to see more pass-through video with low latency in the all-in-one headsets, I think with the inside-out tracking headsets, I think everybody thought that eventually a VR headset would become the AR headset. And I think what's actually happening is the other way around. The AR headsets would become the standard VR headset. We're seeing the VR headsets incorporate the technology that's going to allow them to do augmented reality. So, Peter's asking eventually. Peter's asking who wants to play a game in your home surroundings. And I do think that that's one of the big challenges with VR. Have you played with Quest at all?
Just a little bit. Basically, we tested it a little bit when we were making sure everything worked.
Yeah, I think that, it's a great piece of kit, but again, starting to see videos of people playing in their living rooms emerge and not having space and walking into things. And I think that, one of the things I said a few years ago, I wrote a white paper about this, is that one of the challenges with VR, Microsoft Kinect was the fastest selling consumer technology in history when it launched. And it ultimately failed, even though it sold tens of millions of units. Was because you had to move your couch and your living room coffee table, among some other things. And so VR, is a much bigger challenge with that. What do you think about VR in the home? Is it ever going to take off?
Well,
and when I say ever, I mean this round of hardware, not ever. 10 years from now, it's different. But
well, the reason why I started working with venues almost immediately versus working in the home is, again, because I'm old enough to remember the industry at a different time. So in the game industry, when graphics cards were brand new, we as developers all wanted to build games that used the cool new graphics that we could use with our graphic accelerator cards. But they were really, really high priced at that time. They were like $2,000 or $3,000 per card, and people just didn't have them. So when we made a game that was based on the graphics cards, it didn't sell. We didn't make any money, and there was a vicious circle. Now, luckily, with the graphics cards, they went down in price really fast, and it became very prevalent because You got it. You slapped it into your machine. You cussed at it for 2 or 3 hours, and then it finally worked, and you were good. With VR, we're not really at that point yet because, like you said, you have to dedicate a big section of your environment to it. It is isolating still. People are worried about what they look like when they have the visor on, and other people are looking at them. There's crazy intangibles like that go with it. So I think that it basically it's almost up to these really cool venues to make it popular enough that people wanted it in their home. And that's been my longstanding belief for a long time, that as these venues become something that people are like, I will pay a ticket to go see this because it's that cool. Please give me something that I can do that's at least half as cool at home, and I'm in. And I think that as people
that's ultimately where
experiences, it'll become more popular.
And that's ultimately where all the great consumer entertainment technology started. Most of it is out of home. Arcade games before consoles, movie theaters before big flat screen televisions. And so, I think that's everybody's bet, which is why we're seeing the land rush into VR, the gold rush into location-based VR. Everybody's making that bet. And so hopefully that's right, because I'd love to see the location-based VR space continue to explode and see these amazing
computer games were mainframes only first, and then they were in arcades, and then they were consoles, and then they were on your computer. So the pattern has been done before. We're seeing the same kind of pattern developing here, in my opinion, also. So as people, as the graphics get better, the form factor gets better while it's being developed for all these venues and everything like that, and everybody's still making money on the venues, and that's good. The opportunity, the ability to make great gameplay at home is still, there's stuff that you can do at home. Like one of the earliest things that I can remember that was a VR application that I got really excited about was the Star Trek Enterprise bridge experience. That's the
Bridge Commander. Yeah,
that is a no-brainer. People are standing at consoles, and stuff happens, and they're talking to each other. That is a no-brainer for an experience. What was it? Hover Junkers? Was that what it was called? Where you stood in the middle of your game space and you were on an air cart and you were battling against other people in the space. Do you remember that one?
No, I don't.
Oh, well, it was a good game. It wasn't great, but it was the right direction. And people are, in my opinion, aren't pursuing that direction very much. And they're doing more and more of the isolated, gee, isn't it wonderful? Look at how cool it is kind of experience. And what they really need to start doing is honing in on fun factor and getting people really hooked on that, so that everybody is willing to. You got to make something that's really. I don't want to use the word addictive. I'm not in the industry anymore. I'll say addictive. You got to make something that's addictive that people want to play over and over and over again and demand more of, so that developers can then make more money, and then the games can get better and better as they go. I think that if people focused more on that kind of thing, the venues are great what they're doing. I think that's exactly the right thing. And if people are developing for the home, they should be developing those things that people just can't get enough of. They want to keep playing it over and over and over again and going for that kind of replayability, and then everything would get better fast.
Well, David, we're going to drop the mic right there. Hopefully there's some people who are going to watch this video that are in the game space that's going to be the 2x4 in the head that they need to develop the next generation of these VR experiences. And I couldn't agree with you more. So where do people find out? I did post the website. It's cleanboxtech.com. Right. Are you going to be at some shows and events? I know you guys do a lot of those where people can actually see this and get their hands on it and look at it.
Yeah, Amy is at AWE right now. Amy is the CEO and my partner. We're co-founders together, and she is at AWE right now. And I'm not sure that we have a huge amount of trade shows going forward right now because the season's kind of ending, and we'll pick it up again as they start to ramp up again later in the year. But for now, the website, and we're always available. We're easy to contact. And anybody who knows about us can find us.
Anybody watching this from AWE, go say hi to everybody. Sorry I couldn't be there, and go see Amy and play with a Cleanbox. Check it out on the web. David, really appreciate your time. Peter, I want to know more about what you got in development. Send me a private message. So next week, I've got a special edition of the deep dive coming. I'm going to be unpacking the Sandbox VR investor deck. And so many of you know they raised $68 million through Andreessen Horowitz. Andreessen released a video on their YouTube channel talking about the pitch and having the founders go through the pitch and critiquing it. And so what I'm going to do is a little Mystery Science Theater 3000 version of that video and give you my overlay of raising money for location-based VR, Sandbox, venture capital, and all kinds of other shit. So we will see you next week, David. I hope to see you there. Let's grab a beer and talk old school arcades when we're in the same town sometime.
Any day.
All right, my friends. We will see you again next week. Remember to share this with your friends. Let's build a community, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Take care.